What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Freedom Investor Radio. I'm your host, John Pearl, and today I am joined by Molly Rose Speed, who is the founder of Virtual Assistant Academy. Molly, welcome to the show today. How you doing?
Hey, John, doing great. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. All right, well, let's dive right into it. So let's start off with kind of a high level of what you're doing now, and then give us the story of how you got there, some of the things you went through that encouraged you to take the route that you've taken.
Yes, yeah. So today I run a virtual assistant academy. It's a certification program to professionalize the virtual assistant industry, which I'm sure we'll get into. And then I also have an agency, a placement agency for our certified virtual assistants to place with entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, you name it. It's been a wild ride. And I never saw this coming. I was that good student, graduated with good grades, took the first decent job I got out of college, thought I was going to be a financial analyst forever. And I had different plans. My husband, active duty military, kind of took us out of the big cities and into these smaller towns. And I did what I could. I worked in healthcare. I was a manager at Target, kind of bopped around and realized really quickly that this wasn't the lifestyle that I wanted to have, and I wanted to have a lot more freedom. So that's what spurred me into this space of being a virtual assistant and learning everything I could in the past 14 years.
Got it. So let's get to the point. I can relate a lot of the guests I have on this show. That's what we're targeting, people who realize that the traditional path wasn't the right way for them. It's not the life that you wanted, whether it's not building enough wealth or not having enough time freedom or control over your life. So, what was the first step that you took in order to put yourself on this trajectory?
Yeah, I think at a young age, I was 24, I realized, and I don't take this for granted because I think it's a hard thing for people to do, that the traditional path wasn't one that I wanted to live. It wasn't what I wanted to do. And so I'd say one of the only times really just took a leap of faith and believed that I could find something else. And so I just quit cold turkey and knew that there had to be a better way to do it. And I didn't have a huge safety net at the time. So it was really just taking that action and learning that, whoa, I could get paid for a service or something that I know how to do on my own. I didn't have to go the conventional route to do it. And the first taste of that was all I needed. And then it was upward toward from then.
Got it. I love it. So, what was what was the first service you provided? How did you figure out what that was going to be? And how did you go out and find clients?
Yeah, so I attended a conference again way back in my 20s called Succeed Faster. It was a high potential student kind of conference where they brought us all in. And it was the first time I heard the word entrepreneur, right? Now it's everywhere. 15 years ago, people weren't starting businesses right and left the way that they are today. And so just having that knowledge of, oh, I can get paid for a service that I offer, that was the turning point for me. And then working in this, what I call soul sucking cubicle job, realizing that something needed to change and I quit cold turkey, I was just giving myself 3 to 4 months to figure it out. And someone from that same conference had posted on social media that they were hiring a crowdfunding campaign manager, social media. And I thought, okay, I know how to use social media. I've never done traditional marketing in it, but let me just see what happens. So I applied for it. And again, as a 1099 contractor going into this, all new to me. And I got the job. I'd created this video, worked all day Saturday, this little video interview that they asked for, and succeeded at crowdfunding $75,000 for a student loan documentary. And I learned everything I could off YouTube, trial and error. I was reading all the blogs on all the major online schedulers and just consumed all this content. And from there, it spiraled into I did a really good job. The founder of that documentary needed an assistant. I asked him 4 times to hire me. He did. We worked together for 8 years. That brought in referrals. And it just basically became, how good could I be at this? And then people just started referring me and talking about my skill set, and I never had to market from then on. So it's kind of how it all got started.
Got it. So you went out and figured it out on your own, which I see a lot in the entrepreneurs that I talk to. It's having that confidence in yourself to get the job done and figure it out along the way. I think that's what holds a lot of people back. Just having that safety net of the W-2 job versus taking a leap of faith and having that confidence in yourself to get the job done. So kudos there. All right. So how did the process go? So you worked as a virtual assistant for a long time. And then at what point
Mm-hmm.
did you realize, like, hey, like other people may benefit from doing this, and I think I can probably provide some value elsewhere to other folks who want to do what I'm doing now. What was that process like?
Yeah, so being a military spouse and a female getting into my late 20s, everyone around me needed flexibility, whether it was friends having children and needing to leave the corporate space or military spouses. And I kept having the same conversation. I was traveling to Europe when my husband was deployed and working from cool hostels and Airbnbs and making good money. And people were like, wow, I want this. Can you teach me? And so I always say, one too many Starbucks dates later, I do what any good course creator does, and I package my knowledge into a program. And it's done several iterations since and become a certification program where we thoroughly vet and sign off certified virtual assistants in the program. But it was really just meeting the need of people wanting this resource and there not being a really professional, to the point solution out there at the time.
Got it. So I want to go off sidetrack just a little bit here before we move on. So you mentioned husband was gone, deployed, so you're spending a lot of time alone, which I have a military background as well. I know this is
Mm-hmm.
definitely the case, especially the case up to about a couple of years ago when the overseas were Iraq,
Mm-hmm.
Afghanistan were much more prevalent. There was a lot of downtime that you had to do whatever, and you used your time in a smart way as opposed to getting on Netflix and binging.
Yeah.
And I see that as an issue a lot with people, the how you use your time. So if we could, let's talk about how you were using your time and some of the difficulties you had with prioritizing what you need to do to excel and to accelerate your business. Talk about time management a little bit.
Yeah, I'd love to. So, time, I say there's two great commodities in life. Well, two that Americans seem to value more than anything. It's time and money. Once we have enough money, we resort to our time. So it's something I've been studying a lot, and it's ever evolving how we use our time. This morning, I found myself just needing a mental break, and instead of doing something maybe calming or sitting on the patio, I turned on Netflix and then I caught myself. I'm like, what am I doing? This isn't adding value. So, a really good point that you're bringing up. And when it comes to being in the online space or in this BA role, time management is extremely important. I think you have to really organize your family life, especially if you're military, people are overseas, or if you're a mom, and then juggle when you're going to do your client work, when you're going to have fun and have this lifestyle, the reason why we're working virtual and working remote and having our own businesses. So being really intentional about it is super important, and having a plan. I think if you start your day and you don't know what you're going to do today, your inbox, for example, will rule your day. Or other people will decide what that is for you. I learned really quickly how important my time was when I was traveling overseas. It was the best part of my life, and talk about freedom. I was like, wow, I made it. I can work wherever I want and have this lifestyle. And so I would really compact my time in the morning, work from 8 to noon, and then go play and see different countries, travel, all of that. So that's where I really found the value in time management.
Excellent. Yeah, and that's one of the most you talked about freedom. That's what this show's all about, having freedom over your money, having freedom over your time and over your life in general. And so with what you've done and what you're doing, I understand it's not like you're creating like you're not retiring, but you are creating you're building control over your life. You get the location freedom. You can work from anywhere in the world, and this is something that my wife and I have been talking about. We have 3 young kids, and she pulled out of the workforce, and now they're at an age where she can try to start doing something, but we don't want to be
Mm-hmm.
locked. We don't want to lock her into specific location. So how does being a virtual assistant or providing virtual services allow you to still make money but work from anywhere in the world? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I love that you said virtual assistant and virtual services, because you really can do anything service wise. So, in these roles, supporting what I would say in general online business owners, you can work wherever you want, most of the time, whenever you want, and you can really charge, keeping within the market norms, really great rates now because our services are in so high demand. So that looks, I mentioned the stay at home mom. If your kids are going to school from 8 to 2:30, you can plug in at 9, work till 2, and show up be totally present for when your kids are home, or duck out on Fridays for those field trips, as an example. Or military spouses, you're able to travel and live at home with your family when your partner's overseas. Or digital nomads, you can work from anywhere. So it truly is flexible. You can sit on the couch like I just did. I'm in front of my computer now, or I might be at a coffee shop this afternoon.
Got it. So a lot of the people who will be hearing this, they may be have that I'm a mentality. They're like part way from transitioning, they may have a side hustle, they're investing in real estate. But when I say the I'm a mentality, meaning I'm gonna do it myself. How does, if you do have a side gig or if you are a solopreneur or something, talk about how you can shift from that mindset of nobody else can do it as good as me and I don't trust anybody else. How do you switch the mindset and how do you build the systems necessary to be able to task something out to somebody else? Because as I mentioned briefly before we hit record, it's been an interesting journey. I work with virtual assistants, and there's definitely some nuance to it. You have to learn how to create the expectations and build the systems, which takes time. It's not easy. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so the word that comes up is control, right? We just want to control this thing, or for most of us, it's our passion, it's our baby, it's our service, the reason why we decided to do this thing on our own or get into investing. So I can completely relate and understand how hard it is to let go. And when I speak with my clients, I often say, don't do everything at once. I walk people through an outsourced prioritization exercise where literally you just write down all the things you do and then prioritize the first 3 to 5 things and just start there. Maybe it's one thing for you. And then you have to just slowly let go, assume that everything's going okay, but verify and baby step and teach as you go. And I see really good things happening with that. Don't have the expectation that something's going to be perfect out of the gate. I think there's really great ways to document what you do, like Loom, which is a screen recording software. If you're a writer, you can write SOPs, although I think Loom is great because you can get something done while you're teaching. And I can't echo that enough. If you're thinking that you're probably going to need to hire soon, start that training deck now while you're just executing your own work. And then using communication and project management tools like Asana are really important when you're working with a team. Setting due dates, having ownership. But again, it's that baby step. And you brought up mindset, which I didn't address, but it really is telling yourself, okay, I'm going to start with this. I'm going to see how it feels. And then I'm going to add the next thing. And I'm going to and just go slowly. And then as you start to relinquish control and see that someone else can actually execute on your behalf, sometimes better than you, it snowballs from there. You just have to have the right person as well.
Yes, definitely true with someone maybe being able to do some things better than you. Like myself, I'm more of I have these big visions and I have these big dreams, a dreamer, creative. But when it comes to the organizational stuff, not the best in that department. So what I've found is releasing some of that control and having some faith and building the systems, and you find that right person who has some of those skills, it can be a really good thing. It takes a while to evolve that mindset, but it have a little faith and you'll get there. I want to hear your opinion about who to hire first. So I've heard a number of opinions on this, and some will say that the most important first hire is someone in an executive assistant type of role where maybe they're like considered a general VA. And then I've heard the other school of thought where it's okay, task specific, just task specific, and then build up, and then maybe one of those workers will have the skill set to oversee some other work that's taking place. What are your thoughts on that?
So I'd say 9 times out of 10, when I work with business owners, their first hire has been or is going to be a virtual assistant, that kind of jack of all trades that can be your right hand, especially for solopreneurs that have so much on their plate. They need to replicate their mind and their brain and have someone that can execute on their behalf across the board. And I see that working really well because then when it does get specific, let's say you produce a podcast, that person can then take over that entire outsourcing process and have an expert that they manage. So it just allows you to use someone a lot more wisely, and then instead of managing several contractors, that person can go ahead and help build out your team and make it very cost effective. You might be paying them in the US an hourly rate, but then when you outsource something like podcast editing, they can get overseas work, which is fantastic at a really great price, and be able to manage that process. So it does depend, I think, on what your business service is and what you're offering. I argue that having a virtual assistant is very helpful from the
Got
beginning.
it. Yes, absolutely. So, what are your thoughts on how to organize and how to manage? I know I've heard you talk about Asana. Asana is great, but it does take some learning. Once you learn all the capabilities of it, things get a lot easier. And that was one of my big issues in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning. I was told, hey, Asana, virtual project management, great. And so I used the basic functions, but when you really get into it, there is a lot of features that you can use to really level up your business. Do you recommend that business owners learn this, the people who are hiring the VAs, or would you say
Mm-hmm.
hire somebody who knows how to do that? I have some thoughts on that, but I want to hear your opinion.
Yeah, I never push a business owner into adding more to their plate, or if they're just not that task management analytical type, more creative. I teach my virtual assistants have those 15-minute calls on Mondays, get their download, and then put it into Asana for your own use. That could be an option. We really meet the business owner where they're at. In a perfect world, I love when the business owner and the team are on Asana. It keeps you out of your inbox, holds everyone accountable, it's transparency. And there are things that the business owner or the client is needing to do in order for the rest of the team to do their task. So it just creates that flow, right? So if you're executing a podcast, you have to do the recording before we can do the edits. But if the recording is delayed, it's going to push everything back, as an example. So I think that it's very important. And I talk a lot about communication, and it's probably one of the biggest breakdowns between business owners, entrepreneurs, and virtual assistants if there's not that clear channel. So using something like Asana with a Voxer, which is a walkie-talkie app, is probably my number one pairing of ways to go instead of text messaging, G-chatting, emailing, phone calls, Zoom, all of that. It leaves a lot of room for error. I'd love to hear your thoughts
Well,
too.
yeah, so I personally have found a lot of benefit in like I had an issue with my first virtual assistant who was a general virtual assistant, handled a lot of the just general tasks to take off my plate. And I found that educating myself, even though it took a lot of valuable time, educating on the power and how to actually use some of these things and set up automations. Once this task is done, it automatically gets sent over here to this person. And that was huge. It's a little bit of time, but it's time well spent learning how to
Yeah.
use these extremely powerful tools. That's my personal experience. Although I could see how it is not worth some people's time to figure that out. If you have the money, the resources to have somebody who specifically already has those skills, that would definitely be the way to go. But I think for when you're bootstrapping it, like that's a task that's important in my opinion. What about as far as organizing a task management software like Asana? So that was another issue I had early on. I was organizing it by area of my business, like operations, finances, marketing, sales, that kind of thing, and that was okay. But recently, I read a book. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called Building a Second Brain, and it's by
Mm-hmm.
a guy named Tiago Forte. You gotta check it out. It would be perfect for you. What it's all about is like how to organize all of the digital information that you consume, and how to, like, you read all these articles online, or you see some value here in a podcast or on YouTube. And there's all of these softwares out here where you can take this article and the highlights from it, and it'll go into what they call your second brain, where it gets organized. And beside the point, anyways, it talks about how to
Love it.
organize your second brain or your project management, and it's project based. So that's what I've started doing. So like right now for the podcast, I have podcast workflow and different sections of my podcast versus just like podcasts in general. That's nothing groundbreaking, but for me, it was groundbreaking. A lot of other
Yeah.
people, like I said, I'm not the most organized, but what are your thoughts on how to best organize and maybe some of the systems you do use within your project management?
I love this question. I was having this conversation about all the inputs we have just constantly coming at us and what do we do with it.
Yeah,
So
and do you use Asana?
I use Asana. It's my number one favorite project management tool. I know everyone has theirs. There are a lot out there. Asana's free too, for those of you looking, at least getting started. It's free. I've always used the free version. It's been great. I've used both, but free gets you by. So I like to see Asana organized by product or service, because if you think about product lines, everything has a marketing function, probably everything has a money function, so it just lets you keep things projected out that way. And then another recommendation I have for Asana is I use something called the weekly team meeting. So it's an agenda that has our KPIs. So we go over those each time, our three priorities each person has, our identify, discuss, solve section. As I'm thinking of things that I need to talk to my client about, instead of pinging them right away or asking right away, it's something I can save and ask them on the call. So it just creates this running list of questions. So efficient and doesn't allow you to forget things. And that goes both ways. And then out of that becomes a who, what, when section. And those are all the tasks. So when you're on the call, you're looking at this, everything from the identify, discuss, solve, or anything that's brought up becomes a who, what, when, and has an owner, a due date, and then those get put into the appropriate projects. So I find that to be super helpful, and people have had great success with that. Other tools I use in conjunction with Asana is I'm a huge G Suite fan. I think everything should live on a cloud, and that's a great place where everything is a living document and connects so well with Asana. And then online schedulers are super important. But I have it down to about 4 or 5 softwares now to run a $1 million business, and it works really well.
Oh,
Run
that's
$1 million
awesome.
businesses,
Yeah,
not the mine.
yeah, I honestly love chatting about this stuff. It's become such an interesting point for me. Let's talk a little bit about how kind of the structure of your business. So if other folks are at a point where they're working by themselves, the solopreneur, the side hustler, and they want to figure out how they can, maybe they're having some success with their side hustle. And once they get those right pieces in place, like how do you end up scaling it over the course of 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years? Like how do you build that? Who are the key pieces that you have in place? And kind of wrap all what we've been talking about with Asana, who gets assigned
Yeah.
what, when, like how the things work.
Yeah, I think the number one piece of scaling, I'd say, are having the right systems. You use the word automations in place, especially if you don't hire a team right away. You have to have this stuff locked up. Automate as much as you possibly can. I mentioned something as basic as having an online scheduler. I'd say 7 of 10 emails I get, people aren't using them still. And you know how much back and forth that does? Just something that small saves so much time for you. And it also protects your time because you're only allowing people to book during certain windows of your time. Like that's a whole conversation we could have about time management. And when I say time management, I think that's the basis of scaling, right? So I think having the right systems in place is extremely important. And then when you're ready financially and have the capacity to onboard someone, because that's the important piece of hiring, the most important in my opinion, you got to hire a team member or somebody to start replicating your work and keep getting you back in what we call the zone of genius, right? The reason you started your business or the way that you can make it grow exponentially while someone else takes over all the day to day. And I think that's extremely important. And then lastly, I think having a vision and having goals that you actually look at every day, every week, whatever that looks like for you. We get so in the monotony of the day to day that a year passes, 5 years pass, and you're like, wow, I'm still hanging out at maybe I've made $10,000 more or only invested in one extra property when I had a goal of 10. That's really important.
Yes, the long-term vision and staying focused on it is huge. I've been at this for a few years now, and it's when I first started off, I was all about the what a lot of people would consider to be corny. That you say your vision statement every day and you
Mm-hmm.
visualize yourself achieving success. It sounds corny to a lot of people who don't do it, but it actually is really powerful. And I've honestly gotten away from that just with kids, work, no
Mm-hmm.
sleep, whatever it may be. So it's tough, but I've also noticed not doing that my mind kind of starts drifting elsewhere. I'm not as laser focused as I was. So I definitely need to get back to doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You mentioned finding the right people for the right jobs. And there's another book that I've read that's helped out with that. I'm not sure if you've heard of Who Not How by Dan
Oh yeah.
Sullivan.
Oh yeah.
That's like what we're talking about here. That book will help you achieve that right mindset. That's a very good book. But one of the things, another thing I want to talk to you about is how can people start building their systems? Maybe they're not at a place mentally yet where they're ready to start doing this, but something that has been extremely important for me is getting those systems for each little task that is to be done in place. And it's really a lot easier than you might think. Like when I first started doing this, I was just dreading, oh, I got to build all the SOPs. And something that I've done is just like you mentioned, Loom. I just record the Loom video and then I just link it right into the Asana task. And that's something people could really start doing right now without even hiring somebody. And do you have any recommendations or lessons learned, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love that you just said link in the Asana task. I just hired a new virtual assistant for myself, and she's newer and she's doing awesome, but she's certainly learning as she goes. And that has been so awesome. So I'll start a task and do one section of it, or do one contact or one part of it, record it, send it to her, and then in the task explain exactly what I need her to do, give her the links, give her all the passwords and everything that you need to actually complete the task. And then she does it. 9 times out of 10, she doesn't even ask a question because the video and the documentation is there. So to your point, even before you've hired someone, if you can just start recording what you're doing, building it out in something like Asana, or hey, if these high tech softwares aren't your thing, use an Excel spreadsheet. That's okay. Just something where you're saying, how to load a YouTube video, how to post my social, what's my branding board, whatever it is for you. There's 1,000 things we could come up with. I think that's super, super valuable to be able to start doing now. And we're talking about systems. So everything that you do is a system. So if you can replicate it, you're not, let's take a blog, for example. If you're a blog writer and you just write every once in a while, systematize that. If you're going to post, your goal is to post 4 blogs a month. I'm going to sit down at the beginning of the month on this day. I'm going to put it on my calendar. These are my 4 topics. I'm going to write about them. I'm going to use ChatGPT to help me these days. It's going to go way faster than it ever did before. But then what do you do with that copy? You got to create the graphic. You got to put it into your website builder. You got to create 3 to 5 social media assets. That's a system. It's a process that we're going through that becomes something that you put into an Asana that all has a little video on exactly how to do that step. So just micro break down those steps. And to us, it comes second nature. We've been doing it in our own businesses. So it might be a little painful, but again, if you record instead of, I think it goes a lot better than writing SOPs.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. Definitely found myself just flying by the seat of my pants last minute having to
Same.
crank stuff out. But then when you have those months, weeks, whatever it may be, when you are like, okay, I'm gonna knock all these tasks out, I'm gonna plan it, systematize it, and time batch it, like it's just a game changer.
Yep.
So all right, let's tell me more about the Virtual Assistant Academy and how. So, say somebody like, okay, I've got this side hustle. I like what Molly's saying here. What do I do? Where's my first step to get involved with what you're doing and start getting help from a virtual assistant?
Yeah. So for those of you looking to hire a certified virtual assistant, we have a company called Virtual Assistant Management, virtualassistantmanagement.com. And this is where we have a professional placement process for matching you with the perfect virtual assistant for where you're at in your business. All these virtual assistants have gone through my training academy, virtual assistant academy. So for those of you that are looking for leaving your 9 to 5, and this is the first step, it's a great place to start. I didn't have this when I started, so I left a lot of money on the table, a lot of time on the table. I did a lot of work that I didn't want to do, and that's what I'm trying to help people with, as well as really professionalize the space of virtual assistants. There's a lot of information out there and a lot of bad stories about virtual assistants, and I think there's definitely a need for really up leveling this because it's such a great resource for business owners and a great career for those that are called to do it.
Excellent. What do you think is the biggest mistake people make when they are taking on a virtual assistant?
Yeah, the word time, we're going to use that again. You're so busy when you go to hire a virtual assistant, that's why you're doing it, or hiring a contractor, that you don't even have the time to properly bring them into your business. Therefore, you're setting a really bad foundation from the get-go. So when we work with clients, we ensure that they have scheduled, dedicated time for onboarding someone. And this can be training. We've talked about really great ways to train people while they're actually executing by using these videos and doing the processes in something like Asana. But bringing them in, I say enrolling them in your vision, right? Getting that personal relationship going from the beginning and learning a little bit about how they like to work, when they like to work, how they like to be communicated with, and setting up those communication channels that I talked about are super important. A dedicated call to password handover. If you don't do that, you're asking for it, because they're just not going to be able to execute for you until that third, what do you call it, authentication goes through, third party authentication. There's nothing worse than sitting down to be a virtual assistant and want to get into something and you have to wait for the code and then it expires and all of that. So just get all of that out of the way, and then have those 30, 60, 90-day check-ins, good start, stop, continue conversations, and make them both ways. If you've never worked with someone on your team, you're probably learning too, and there's ways that you can do it better. So ask for that feedback is super, super important. To sum it up, the onboarding process, don't mess it up because it's very important. And then that relationship will thrive and they'll stay your assistant for a lot longer than usual.
Yes, I'd like to double down on that. I've made all those mistakes, get surrounded by people who have talked. They're a couple years farther in the process and all their systems are already, it is very passive for them because they've been working with people for a long time. Totally learned the importance of that first chunk of time. You mentioned the 30, 60, 90, and it's definitely, you definitely have to put the effort in, but it's that effort up front. You put it in and get on the same page and take care of all those verifications like you mentioned. Just get it out of the way. It's going to be
Yep.
a lot better. So,
Yes.
all right. So, what is something on the entrepreneurship side that you wish you would have known when you were starting this journey that you know
Mm-hmm.
now that other people who are earlier on in their journeys may benefit from?
I'm just going to go with comes to the top of my mind. You don't have to say yes to everyone and everything. It's something that's taken me years to figure out, and this is my year of saying no. But I think when we start businesses, we just think we have to do it all, and we have to take every deal and do everything that is being presented to us. And by saying no, that quote, by saying no or saying yes to something else, just remember that as things are coming up and follow your intuition on things that I don't think I really want to do this project, or I don't think this is the right contractor for me, or whatever it is for you. And I think that would have saved me a little bit or a lot of pain over the years.
Love it. Absolutely. All right, Molly. So let's do one last question. This is the question I ask all of my guests. For a quick background, mentioned it briefly, but I was informed a few years back that I was going to be losing my job at the nuclear power plant that I work at over the course of the next few years. So that set me off on this journey to build up my passive income, start investing in real estate. And what would you offer to other folks who are looking to escape the W 2 world, whether that's creating their own business or investing in real estate, whatever it may be? What do you think the one piece of advice you would have for folks who are looking to take more control over their lives?
I think I'm going to share two things. One, I think we all have the ability to create a career around our life, not a life around our career. And that brings us to the second part. Corporate can be great, the 9 to 5 that we all know and have probably done, but there are thousands of other solutions out there if you don't want to be tied to your desk, your job, your 10 days of vacation. And the one I offer is pretty low entry. Being an executive virtual assistant can be an amazing professional career. This can look very different to anyone that's out there. So I think we all have a choice, and create the career around your life, not your life around your career, is my advice. Just mantra that every morning and see what happens.
I love it. I love it. All right, Molly, where can people go to reach out if they want to follow along, see what you're doing, learn more about Virtual Assistant Academy? Tell us where they can go.
Yep. So I'm mollyrosespeed.com, Molly Rose Speed on Instagram. I love chatting. If anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out directly. I'm very involved with anyone in my community. Become a virtualassistantacademy.com, or if you're looking to hire, it's virtualassistantmanagement.com. Lots of places.
All right. Excellent. Thanks so much for your time, Molly. Really enjoyed the conversation. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.